and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Where will China-France relations head amid the great transformation? This is a question on many people's mind. This week, French President Emmanuel Macron is paying a state visit to China, marking the beginning of a new 60-year cycle in China-France relations. It will be Macron's fourth state visit to China and a reciprocal visit to Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to France last year. Recent high-level talks between the two sides are seeking to further enhance economic and financial cooperation, focusing on areas such as aerospace, digital trade, and green transition. How will China and France cooperate for a better future? How much can they do now? Let's loop in our panelists from both sides. Joining me in Paris, Anne-Elizabeth Moutet, political analyst. Also in Paris, Joab Tolker, associate professor from American Graduate School in Paris. In Beijing, Wang Yiwei, Jean Monnet chair professor, director of the Institute of International Affairs at Renmin University of China. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Important state visit by the French President Emmanuel Macron to China. Now, Anne-Elizabeth, tell me, what do you expect as a French scholar?
It's the fourth visit of President Macron to China. The last time he was there in 2023. He's got preoccupations, both economic and in international policy, especially in regards to Ukraine. He would like to correct the imbalance of trade between France and China, because the trade deficit of France vis-a-vis China is almost 3 billion euros. He's taking a large contingent of French businessmen to have talks. He's also hoping that China will help France's push for a ceasefire and peace in Ukraine.
All right, I'd love to ask. Joab, your thoughts?
The overall international context is not a very flattering one, to put it mildly. We don't know where the Russian-Ukrainian war actually stands, whether without the intensive efforts of the White House of America. The European and French position regarding all that is also an uncomfortable one, to say the least. So all that really, it just adds up to the economic considerations. And to complicate things even further, sorry for that, is the unstable political situation in France itself. As you may know, President Macron has lost his majority in parliament some time ago now. And over the last year and more, he's sort of trying to go on with the agenda with a lot of difficulties right now. For example, the parliament is fighting badly in order to pass the budget, and it's still not here. So the overall background is not a very comfortable one on the French side.
I see one list after another, issues that needs to be worked out. But what is exactly the French national interest and the French leadership or important role inside the EU? Has France within itself have a good discussion when the president is having a visit?
You might say that it's not dignified to have a discussion when you have a diplomatic visit, but at the same time, the French president himself is in a difficult situation. He wants to be a diplomatic leader for peace in Europe and in the world, and he wants to foster sort of an overarching relationship with China and with the big powers. It is about the only thing in which he has full powers now that he has no majority in parliament, because the French president is sole responsible for defense and foreign policy, even when his prime minister is of a different party. But the main preoccupation of the French is the economy.
Yiwei, what about from the Chinese side? Much to expect?
Well, when we talk about China-European relations, there are two levels. Number one is bilateral with a member state, which France definitely is take a leading role because it's the only P5 country in the European Union. And the second is European Union multilateral relationship with China. So usually the bilateral, the member state play the good card, and the benefits a lot. The signing the deal. And then for the level, usually the European Union playing the bad card, brings more pressure to China, so very difficult to handle with. So President Macron now has two hands. The right hand actually, on behalf of the France, want more access to the 15th five-year plan, not just the market access, but even the competition with Germany, because the German foreign minister just visited China, put the EV standard harmonized. So France will be also cut with that. But on behalf of the European Union, I think they want China to help make sure the European Union not be marginalized from the Ukraine peace talk.
We have seen France, on the one hand, try to promote trade with China, but on the other hand, for example, on the issues of EV, has been playing a very hard hand against China's manufacturers. So how do you understand the fact that French wants part of the pie, but at the same time, not necessarily willing to be a cooperative partner?
It depends how you define cooperation, cooperative partner. I mean, and you're quite right to say that there's friction. And you mentioned EVs, which is important. It's an important market between France and China. But more recently, there have been the halt to the most of the activities of the Chinese online retailer Shein, which now has been forced to close its entire marketplace, with France pleading, and the Parliament, many voices in Parliament, saying that there is unfair competition. Whether this is true is another question, but it certainly is a feeling, and it's become a hot button issue in France. I think even if Emmanuel Macron wanted to sort of push back, which I don't think he does, he would find it difficult because he would not find support.
Yeah, emotional politics we have seen over the past few years, shall I say, spreading around the world. In Europe, some could also argue the same. Now, Anna Elizabeth, what is in the fundamental interests of France? What are some of the pragmatic issues China is willing to work with France to work out, including some of the issues that's of China's concern?
China attached a great importance of the relationship with France, because France is first Western country built diplomatic ties with China, and quite independent. They are not just a P5 member without any American's military presence in Western countries. So that's very unique. I think China helped to France to pay more attention to the Chinese opinion reform, the 15th five-year plan, and then to not just put China as a rival, but to seek more opportunities and as a partner.
Yeah.
So I think that's basically to hedging of the President Trump's tariff war.
Talk about panda, which is interesting because panda is not just the giant panda in China is not just a lovely animal, but at the same time, it has already become a symbol, for example, earlier of panda diplomacy.
I told you a story, it's very interesting. When the French missionary visited a village in Sichuan, he didn't see this animal before. Most of the Chinese pandas are not actually in the in the gardens of the European countries. So that means China and European relations is mostly close in people to connections and animal to animal connections.
Now, Joab, can you tell me about whether the fact that there is a lovely story about panda between China and France, and in political history, we have seen panda diplomacy being exercised at a critical moment. But will the French president be able to catch that moment together with his Chinese counterparts?
It's a lovely symbol, and that's lovely by itself. It is surrounded by an entire mechanism, which we sometimes call soft power, namely how do you gather influence through means which are unconventional and certainly peaceful. And this is even lovelier because we are thinking about very pleasant topics to talk about. I often tell my students that the most charming example of soft power, or the exercise of soft power in the world, is probably the panda diplomacy held by China. And I still believe so. But I don't see right now anything specific related to the bilateral French-Chinese panda universe that may help the talks between President Xi and President Macron, and certainly wouldn't push any way better to a better direction the issues, the heavy issues which are there.
Anna Elizabeth, multilateralism seems to be in the speeches of both presidents when they talk both internally and to the rest of the world. How much is there that the two permanent members of the UN Security Council will be able to help in a way when the world is very confused as to what exactly is the logic of the world?
I think, I'm not very optimistic in terms of actual results. I think both nations, China and France, want to keep sort of a contact. They want to keep their ears open, and they want to come to a conclusion that will not rock the boat, that will be good for the relationship in political and economic terms. I would say it is an opportunity for a reset. America is a very large partner, as we all realize. So there's a possibility that there will be, again, within the European members of the G7, there will be consultation in order to sort of try and push America in a different direction. But there's a feeling that we are more concerned by Ukraine than America is concerned by Ukraine, because it is our continent, which is closed, because countries that are members of NATO and members of the EU are being threatened by Russia. And this is something that Emmanuel Macron is not alone in feeling, is something that is one of the main concerns of French diplomacy.
How do you see the building, nurturing of credibility between China and France? There seems to be a lot of different concerns in China about that.
That the issue of what you call credibility
or trust
between the two parties here is actually something which accompanies the relations between China and Europe and China and France for some time now. It has economic symptoms, economic dimensions, it has political, and it has strategic incarnations, if you wish. You see, if you look at trade issues, for example, China is traditionally suspected by the Europeans and the French in particular in trying to push too much its export efforts and flooding European markets, and by then just making even more difficult the situation of several French and European industries which are suffering anyway. Chinese, as I understand...
There's a lot of words like that, flooding and this and that, but we see a lot of rhetorics. If there's no real interest in the imports, why would a country import things?
No, when you look at the figures, you see indeed an increase in the potential export effort of China towards Europe in comparison to...
That's very true. That's true.
Past.
But doesn't that mean, meanwhile, we also see other countries exporting to France as well. So can you say it is flooding the French market if the Chinese product is doing really well, it's not expensive, and it's technology savvy? And why should the importers in France say, we don't want to do that? I mean, nobody is forcing any country to import anything, but rather to the interest of that country to make their own decisions, isn't it?
Yeah, but things are in this domain, as in others, but mainly in this domain, things do happen on bilateral grounds. So you can't just wish what you wish, apply the policies which are related to what you wish, and then expect the other part.
The question should be how France be competitive. Be competitive in terms of its exports, for example, in terms of its trade records with other trading partners. By the way, I think EU right now is still having a tariff question, even with the United States. How will that negotiation likely to evolve in the near future? Yiwei, tell me more. Yeah, please, Joab, finish your
you're right.
Your point.
You're right. The tariff, we're for some months now into this tariff reality, which is obviously an initiative of America, about which I think everybody feels uncomfortable, to put it mildly, and Europe certainly does, and France certainly does. But in regard to the relations between Europe, France, and China, and this credibility issue you mentioned a few minutes ago, one has to keep in mind that China is always suspected of preferring negotiation on bilateral level between itself, China, and Germany, and France, and Italy. Whereas the posture of the European community policy is that, we should get closer to a common, united.
All right. About the nuclear development, about the space exploration, just to give an example, in October, the European Space Agency did set the SMILE satellite, which stands for Solar Wind Magnetosphere Ionosphere Link Explorer satellite, jointly developed with China, has completed all its tests and is now in storage awaiting launch. This is just one of those examples of cooperation between the two sides. Will those goodwill cooperation continue, be sustainable? And will some of the other initiatives that have already been there be implemented? Anna Elizabeth.
I'm quite, that is something that I think has a future, because it is something of interest to both countries, and it is something in which countries have got, especially in nuclear, have got a clear leadership and technology advance, both of them. So that is something that would work.
I hope so. And I'm sure that they can reach many consensus when President Macron's visit, because the French comparative advantage is very clear, not just traditional luxury products, but in the internal space technology and civilian nuclear and even new energy, so-called the controlled fission, nuclear fission, now located in Hefei and Chengdu. We learn and benefit from the cooperation with France.
How much do you think the French president, at a time of political difficulty at home, will still be able to play its role, and your country be able to play its role in terms of EU coming to consensus on important issues regarding China?
The capacity of Monsieur Macron to intervene with a lot of efficiency this time is obviously smaller, more limited than in similar circumstances in the past, because, as you said, of the internal political situation in France, which had greatly weakened him, because of the fact that he's towards the end of his term. He has about a year and a half to go, and he cannot run again for the presidency. So that's sort of the end part of his itinerary. And then because of the substantial issues, I mean, getting a consensual position amongst 27 members of the EU is objectively very difficult, even in moments in which the overall level of agreement and complicity is higher. This is not the situation right now.
But we have seen some quite successful negotiations and dialogue, particularly top-level diplomacy between China and the United States. And after that, many are asking the question, where is EU today? How much does it matter? And how relevant is it going to be on some of the most crucial issues? What are your thoughts?
Well, the debate exists and grows actually in Europe. The main emphasis right now is on the hard power aspect of things because of the war in Eastern Europe, and military budgets and mobilizations. There has been an announcement of President Macron just a few days ago and he's launching as early as next year voluntary military service, which is something which has not existed in France for decades. Yeah. So the overall atmosphere is a tense one. And the Europeans feel that they have to catch up in this domain, and quickly, because what is at stake is extremely important and might be alarming.
On security or on innovation as well?
Yes. The Europeans feel that they have to catch up on the innovation grounds, and that their situation is far from being neither easy nor flattering,
All right.
either vis-a-vis China or vis-a-vis the United States. So Europeans actually go through sort of a depressed, shall I call it, period in which they have to catch up in many domains, and
All right.
it isn't simple.
We have seen China, United States, and France are likely to host some of the important occasions for discussions. China is going to be the host country for the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting for the year 2026. G20 summit will be hosted by the United States. By the way, the two leaders of the two countries have already talked on the phone and talk about support for one another on these two occasions. Meanwhile, we also see France place a lot of importance, the current administration places a lot of importance on its host status of the G7 summit for the year 2026. But how much will that matter? Many would ask in a very competitive schedules for many national leaders for the year 2026. Not to mention the rapidly changing global situations.
The G7 is very important because the first G7 was invented in France and held in France, and it was led by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, and we are talking about something like more than 50 years ago. So it's a restricted forum, which makes it easier to get to an agreement or to at least a sort of common narrative than the G20, where you've got North and South, where you've got very different countries, and therefore it's something that ends up with declarations that have less substance because everybody wants to agree on.
You mean rhetorics by the developed economies can likely to be reached? Consensus.
Certainly not in the G7, but in others we'll see. One of the things, as I said, the one area in which Emmanuel Macron constitutionally, by Article 15 of the Constitution, is in charge of foreign policy and defense policy for France, because he's the president according to the Constitution of the Fifth Republic, means that he is not that hampered, mostly also because there's sort of I won't say that there's complete agreement among the French, perhaps this never has existed, but by and large, the French political objectives, which are to be multilateral and sort of have good relations with various countries across the world, is something that the French broadly agree on.
I think that the best scenario, beyond the immediate examination of G7 or another major world summit in a given moment, the best scenario for France is a larger, deeper consensus within Europe. This is a French interest, and as I see it, it is a European interest. Okay. And if I want to push a little bit forward, this way of thinking, I could also argue that in a way, it could be a favorable element in other parties' way of looking at things, including China.
All right.
Now, this is not going to happen tomorrow, and it's not going to happen during the coming year, 2026, and it certainly isn't going to happen during the 3 days of Macron's visit in China. But the more circumstances accumulate which push different European countries, and perhaps mainly the major ones, the Germans, the French, the Italian, the Poles, to share more of their economic and strategic and social options, the better it will be for all of them in the long run, although it might not be diagnosed and looked upon this way at a given moment.
All right.